what's going on. So this is going to be essentially just week one December higher time frame analysis. Um, we did this last month, and so this kind of serves as like a look back, right? But we already had the look back video, so this is the true like this is essentially like the next cast forward. So those are those personal two classifications of the higher time frame analysis. So yeah, either way, we got our list, right? Or our five lists. Um, so yeah, man, we'll just start off with commodities. I flagged a few of these, right? We got these five. These were basically the same ones we were looking at last month. So we're looking at some potential like follow-up moves. Additionally, we're going to be, really watching the feeder cattle and live cattle for the month of December here. Excuse me. So yeah, we'll just go through this. So what did we see last month with corn here? We saw that bullish expansion. So, potentially anticipating more of that, right? What is the seasonal tendency for corn? Um, Essentially anticipating the low, right? Forming sometime in August. Well, really what I meant to say is the low forming sometime in, autumn and or the fall season, right? But it's interesting how we see here, right? But we're looking for that, essentially that would be put in place during the fall and essentially expand higher into the summer. Like that's kind of the overall anticipation. And so, we could see more of that this following month. I'm not really, so like I'm not holding to this anticipation as tightly. This isn't even really an anticipation. In the way that last month, um, well, personally, I keep a log, right, of these things that I'm looking for. And last month as well as this month, corn has been in like the secondary list for commodities that we're watching, right? Last month, the priority list was wheat, copper, and oil. This month for commodities, the priority list or primary list or whatever is just oil since we're in December here. But that's kind of an aside. But just saying that, say like that's kind of what I'm anticipating here for corn, but this isn't really an anticipation for the month. So either way, would be curious to see if we essentially return to yearly open here, as well as this order block potentially kind of interesting confluence, right, with the open and the well, open of this candle here as that order block, simultaneously the yearly open as well. So pretty fascinating confluences there. On to wheat here. What did we see last month? Right, we saw that expansion higher. So this was that primary, this is one of the looks last month. Pretty interesting off of the monthly here. Overall, same situation as holding, but not really in anticipation this month either. But essentially expecting continued bullishness. But at the same time, too, this is another, at least this month, the month of December here, this is a secondary observation. So this is not my like, observations for the month, or excuse me, anticipations, right? These aren't like those two are not formal anticipations, if you will. Um, so yeah, here on soybeans now. What did we see last month? We saw that continuation of the bullishness from October. Very interesting fall season here for soybeans. Again, with these seasonal concepts, right? Well, bringing it back to wheat really quick. That seasonal expectation of the bullishness. We talked about this last video. Potentially, we see just more of that here in December. Um, but we also understand that, like, essentially January into like winter into summer is essentially like short wheat. So we could see that one final pop in December here, and then go lower, or we this could be the high, right, with November. So it's really a question. Do we trade to and through November's high? That's kind of the subtle question here with wheat, not really looking to anticipate anything crazy, mainly because of last month's anticipation, simultaneously because we sort of understand like this could be the high for essentially a early rolling out of the tendency of like wheat bearishness, wheat sell program, um, winter into summer. So, but yeah, bringing it back to soybeans, right? Essentially understanding like, we were anticipating higher prices last month, right? We saw that follow up. Really, really algorithmic respect shown to the SIBI here. Um, and so we could see potentially, again, another secondary observation here, but we could see bearishness potentially December, January, as like retracement. So I wouldn't be surprised here with, soybeans if we like go lower this month. Um, Here with feeder cattle. Pretty interesting look, right? Pretty interesting action last month as well. Fair value gap here off of the monthly, dropping down to the weekly, right? Because that's kind of what I was watching intramonth. Or yeah, yeah, intramonth, but here off of the weekly, right? Pretty interesting, right? We see the violation. Um, Technically, there hasn't been like, well, I mean, violation of this candle's low, but there hasn't been that closure below the low. We just saw I mean, so very interesting kind of situation here, right? Normally with the BISI, if there's like, a closure of a bearish candle below, this price point, then it's, that inversion fair value gap. However, we see from week to week, the gap lower, then we trade higher and then continue higher. So pretty interesting overall. Um, Potential monthly order block here, right? That's really the observations. That's the subtle observation. Um, yeah, I mean, with the feeder cattle and the live cattle as well, it's pretty fascinating. Um, I mean, we sort of expect like, the seasonal with feeder is bearish retracement almost, or like bearishness in fall. So we really did see that. So it is fascinating, that would serve as that retracement to then essentially go higher. Um, we anticipate, bullish expansion in feeder cattle going into spring. So potentially we see, I mean, we could see more retracement, but I really wouldn't be surprised. Again, this is still in the secondary classification, but I wouldn't be surprised if this, is essentially treated as an order block. And we trade higher either way. Curious to see how we deliver at this sell side array. And so with these sort of like secondary observations here, I'm basically just like watching the delivery. Back to corn here for a second. I'm watching the delivery into the sell side array. Not demanding anything, literally just watching. Kind of same look here with wheat. Do we just expand out of the consolidation potentially two and three equal highs here? Soybeans is its own situation, right? Specifically, we're watching this BISI as well, but really the SIBI, and so the repricing between both of those is, its own form of like a true consolidation and like a relative premium, relative to the consolidation down here on the lower time frames, right? Between the last, few months of price action here because we are monthly after all. So either way, kind of fascinating, right? Basically just framing it off of the sell side array. Could see higher prices out of the order block, right? As that quote unquote like buy side array, like as that catalyst for higher prices. But same framing, right? Like from here to here could be the move, intra-week, intraday, intra-session, etc. And so that's where, where we can see that like subtle framing of these, of these well, these commodities, but these like selected situations where we're really not demanding too much. Um, and that can be appreciated here off of the higher time frame. So basically the mirroring of the same sort of look here with live cattle. Um, do we essentially just trade to and through previous months high? Pretty fascinating, right? Oops, the subtle difference there. And so, yeah, I mean, we have seen the fall retracement, but really expecting, like early, or, 2026, January continued expansion. So we could see, the beginning of that here in December. That's really just what I'm casually looking at. So we can look at, hogs, not really, I mean, right. So we were looking at this last month. This was like a secondary anticipation here. Essentially does price right, trade to and through the sell side there. So we see the engagement of the sell side, very fascinating. Very fascinating where we're at as well, right? Potentially previous months, um, open really here off the monthly at least as potential order blocks. So, I'm not even really flagging hogs here, but nonetheless fascinating delivery to the buy side and then delivery to the sell side, engagement of both sides of the market there simultaneously, ultimately, really respecting this monthly order block here. So very fascinating move. Kind of interesting as well. Gold and silver here currently, right? Silver making higher highs, gold making lower highs. Wouldn't be surprised, right, if gold, just essentially catches up to silver as like the low resistance run, right? We were watching copper, right? What did copper do last month, right? We saw that expansion essentially to and through previous month's high. So we are, essentially like doing the same thing already into this month as well. Pretty fascinating as far as the wick goes, right? You know, long term, next year, etc. Anticipating copper gets above $6, right? And, higher as well potentially, but immediate term, really curious how we trade, relative to this consequent encroachment of the wick here, $5.50 or so. It says this month's candle close above that level. And just in general, like relative to that level, where does this month's candle close? Does it close below it, above it, etc.? Um, but yeah, again, like not really demanding a whole lot. This is not even a primary observation here. This is just a secondary look. So really the only primary look here for the commodities this month is oil. We do anticipate essentially like sell side expansion in December. So, classically just do we trade to and through previous month's low? If we do, I really wouldn't be surprised if we just, trade to the 55 level, but not really demanding that. So that is that anticipation, right? This is that first like formal anticipation of the month is essentially just trading to and through, previous month's low here. So yeah, those are the commodities. We'll go to the indices now, and we can start with ES. Pretty, low resistance situation here on ES. Not a whole lot to say. This is, our second formal anticipation here. Like on the macro, I am essentially anticipating lower prices for ES here, but I really wouldn't be surprised if the market just continues to get pumped. So really treating previous months. candle here as order block. Pretty interesting situation as well. Um, During November, I was also watching the October monthly candle here as potentially like an inversion order block or, a bearish order block. So due to the nature of the closing of November's price action, closing essentially above mean threshold of the order block here, treating this as that inversion level, essentially just like complementing the bullish order block of the November candle. So either way, kind of fascinating, fascinating perspective, fascinating sort of like reversal thesis. I really wouldn't be surprised if we just like pop the high here. Um, but at the same time, too, not really needing that. So, subtle framing is essentially trading to and through previous month's high, which is like definitely going to happen. So, really just looking for that, bullish expansion in NASDAQ here or in ES, but same thing in NASDAQ, right? Same perspective, kind of fascinating. NASDAQ is almost like lagging, right? ES has already traded above previous month's open. It's already like engaged that change in the state of delivery, if you will, with the order block of previous month's candle. NASDAQ has yet to do that here. So that's pretty fascinating. And so this is that, secondary or, just the mirroring of the anticipation here with NASDAQ is trading to and through previous month's high. And, naturally we expect, to trade to and through October's high. But that is the framing for both of these this month here. We will move on to the sectors of the S&P now. So yeah, same look, right, for the SPY ETF, literally just like popping the high, popping previous month's high, etc. We already saw that on SPY. Um, Pretty fascinating, I'll just say, right, off the monthly chart. We saw this split in materials. Pretty fascinating. Split in, I think this is, what's this again? I forget. I think this is discretion. Yeah, didn't see it in that. Saw it in this. Right? We were just like, subtly kind of looking at that. But just the whole concept of like a stock split is, obviously kind of ridiculous. I don't really even know what to say here. I don't even know if this is like intraday when you go down to the daily chart. That's what it looks like. You know what I mean? So it's like I don't know. I've literally never even seen this. Obviously, it didn't do it on all of them. So that's pretty fascinating. Just wanted to share that. But yeah. Either way, as far as like primaries for sectors here, we watching healthcare. So, last month we did see that bullish expansion. Pretty interesting. Um, essentially anticipating, a trading to and through previous month's high here. So that's really like the common thesis for all of these is that we're just gonna like run to and through previous month's high. Really not demanding a whole lot here for this December. But at the same time too, really curious to see here on healthcare off of the weekly. How do we, deliver relative to the inversion here? Do we respect inversion fair value gap as well as off the monthly, right? See it right there, but that's my question, right? Relative to this anticipation of higher prices to and through previous month's low, do we essentially put that low in respect to that like top half of the inversion fair value gap, if you will? So that's really the question. Consumer discretionary as well. What did we see last month, right? Traded to and through those lows. Pretty fascinating. I mean, not really anticipating a whole lot here. Uh, but at the same time, too, really would like to see essentially trading to and through previous month's high. So same look as healthcare essentially. And looking at housing as well. Um, really kind of anticipating, right? What did we see last month? So that return to the weekly inversion. So essentially anticipating price trading to and through previous month's low here, potentially locking in, right? We've already seen the change in the state of delivery, excuse me, change in the state of delivery. Um, well, I meant to say, off of the monthly chart, we're looking at that as the anticipation. But it's interesting how we're seeing off of the weekly here. We're seeing the weekly bearish order block printed here. So very fascinating. Curious to see, as we record this, right? It's that essentially the end. It's the weekend in between week one and week two of December here. Um, and so curious to see, right, with that final week of November into that first week of December here, potentially just as that transition point, as we also see that change in state of delivery, would be fascinating confluence to see, personally just seeing this here off the weekly here off the lower time frame. Curious to see what we do next week. So yeah, secondary observation, going into the secondary list here for the sectors is staples, right? We got consumer staples, consumer discretionary. So kind of fascinating. Not really anticipating anything here for the staples. Really just sort of trying to familiarize myself here. Um, I wasn't watching this last month, so yeah, trying to remember why this level is even on the chart here, dude. I really don't know. That might even been like a typo. This might even be from the stock split here. Yeah, either way, kind of weird. Something to consider if you're going to hold these sectors. I don't even know, but pretty fascinating nonetheless. I'm not even sure what this means here, dude. But either way, kind of just watching this, right? We're in this consolidation as far as yeah, yeah, ADJ here. I mean, I understand what it means, but it's like I don't know if it's on or off or what, or why you would even look at it like that. But either way, interesting, basically consolidation pretty neat here. So it's really that secondary observation for the sectors. Onto the stocks here. Looking at a handful of stocks this month here in December. JP Morgan here. What did we see last month? Essentially traded to and through previous month's high and, really that seasonal high, that September high there. So that was that anticipation last month. So essentially this month, essentially follow-up move, like continuation of the expansion to and through previous month's high. So this is the only primary stock observation for the month here. Only like, quote, like when I say prime, like everything that's in the primary list is like a formal anticipation. Everything in the secondary list is like something that we're just kind of watching in the background. We're still monitoring it, but it's like not, it's not the primary observation. Looking at GE this month here for our secondary observation. I mean, it's just pretty fascinating. We're seeing this reversal, potentially violation of the fair value gap here. Right, potentially we see the true violation of that whole array entirely, trading to and through the low there. So not even anticipating that for the month, right? Again, in that secondary anticipation, but really curious, right? Um, just swinging back, right? Understanding essentially how the market delivers. We saw, potentially like the beginning of an anticipated move lower, a protracted move throughout 2026, 2027, et cetera, potentially here in November. December could just like pop higher, right? We could see that pop and then trade lower. So that's really where I'm coming from here. But like ES could still kind of deliver in the premium for a while and then, gradually trade lower. The same thing with NASDAQ, et cetera. But it would be interesting to see some of these stocks that have been in that premium essentially just roll over first. Been seeing that with Bitcoin a little bit, right? We'll talk about Bitcoin in a second, but either way, sort of my narrative here. Why I'm even interested in like seeing what this does. What I'm, GE specifically. Now on to Lockheed Martin. Pretty interesting, right? What did we see last month? A violation of this array here. Now into a inversion fair value gap. Curious, again, secondary classification, literally just like how does December deliver? Do we return to this level potentially as that further, intra-month retracement and then sell off again into 2026, 2027. So, yeah, kind of interesting, dude. Added this to my watch list of stocks. Pfizer. I didn't really realize that Pfizer was at such a discount, all time. I mean, I wouldn't even say all time, but I guess I mean like, within the past, 10, 20 years, etc. Pretty interesting level there. Uh, yeah, I'm not even, really interested in this, but I am at the same time. Dude, if there was something I would short, it would be Pfizer. And it's pretty interesting what it's done. I mean, right, 2020, we saw the run up, but I mean, it's in the, it's in the discount here. And so that in and of itself is fascinating. Also kind of seeing like this like trend line concept. Retail loves to get long off of something like that. So that makes me sort of like inherently short on uh, Pfizer itself here. Again, secondary observation, but essentially like do we really just like make new lows? Do we trade to and through, during 2026 here, do we trade to and through previous year's lows? So sort of a secondary observation slash question there. So yeah, now into crypto here. Um, really what I was saying about Bitcoin earlier. I mean, it's fascinating what happened last, cycle, if you will, here in 2022. We saw that sell side expansion in Bitcoin. Um, we essentially saw the same thing in NASDAQ, right? Where's 2022? Right here, bang. Same thing in ES, bang. And so very fascinating. Essentially, Bitcoin was like the first to move lower there. I mean, among other assets, but like Bitcoin moved lower before S&P and Nasdaq, and all those top companies um, moved lower as well. And so it's fascinating. What did we see last month here with Bitcoin? We saw that move lower, um, dropping down to the weekly here, violation of the BISI and the premium here, even premium of this relative little range, but obviously like higher time, like multi-year look back premium. Nonetheless, kind of fascinating trigger as far as that violation. Delivery into this lower fair value gap here. Really looking for the violation of this fair value gap as well, continuing lower, potentially into the discount market here, 70,000 or lower. And so, yeah, I mean, really like formal anticipation for the month of December here is that Bitcoin trades to and through essentially like spring low here and or yearly low. Essentially like expands on the yearly range late year here for December. So that is the subtle anticipation. Conservative anticipation in alignment with essentially like, everything else is just trading to and through previous month's low here, which is that level. And it is interesting here off the weekly what we're seeing again. Like we talked about this with, I believe it was the housing market, or the housing sector ETF. Um, but like final week of November as that array, and what we're seeing here during week one. So potential, bearish order block here, and delivering lower. So that is that look for Bitcoin, right? Another primary observation, or primary anticipation. Um, I mean, ultimately, same look here with Monero is like lower prices. That's just really the anticipation for Bitcoin and Monero. I wouldn't be surprised if they like, pair one to one, even though I think there is a sort of like inverted nature between Bitcoin and Monero. Um, I really am sitting in more of like a casual stance with Monero, but at the same time too, my basic like observation is previous month's range. And so I really would like to see Monero trade lower. We're seeing here off of the weekly potentially bearish order block, right? Same look with Bitcoin as well, right? That bearish order block. So yeah, man. I mean, I don't really see like a defined level of liquidity. I mean, we could literally just trade to and through the previous month's low. Um, but essentially just looking for Monero to like deliver into the discount of previous month's range, which we're seeing already, but like, you know, deeper delivery, excuse me, deeper delivery, really sell side expansion out of the bearish order block here, treating it as this, lower time frame, relative to the monthly, at least this lower time frame change in the state of delivery to really complement this look here. So yeah, those are those final primary observations here. Kind of just watching casually XRP and XLM here, Stellar Lumen and Ripple. Interesting, right? Sort of inner market analysis between these two, XRP and XLM here, these ISO tokens, if you will. Right? Casual anticipation. Stellar Lumen essentially does the stop hunt as well, that XRP did. That in and of itself could be a fascinating look potentially to and through entry year low, then potentially like trading to the discount of that range there, or equilibrium. Like that could be its own sort of look. Not even saying that, it's not even in anticipation, but kind of interesting how XRP ultimately did that during October, like opened, traded all the way down and essentially like returned back into the discount. Like that in and of itself could have been the turtle soup trade, basically just like buying it as it's below that. I mean, very, very like, I mean, it's very volatile months, obviously, but within that 76% move, like you could have gotten 10%, 20%, 10% a few times, etc., right? Something like that. So yeah, man. I mean, kind of curious, right? If we're just like subtly bearish on the market in general, despite our low resistance, bullish anticipations, in the indices, uh, these various sectors, etc. Like overall, I am pretty bearish here for the month of December going into 2026, going into next year. And so I'm kind of just watching like the crypto cycle as we go bearish. I was able to, essentially um, observe in real time the bullish expansion in Monero here as we do the bearish expansion in Bitcoin. And so that has been a very, very fascinating takeaway personally. Um, Simultaneously with these ISO tokens, just really like that late year expansion out of the consolidation here. So looking to potentially take advantage of that as well next cycle, in the next, year or so, um, multiple years, etc. Just for that like consolidation and the discount, very fascinating overall. So those final crypto tokens is basically going to do it. So yeah, thanks for watching.